So let's have a quick video about how not to deploy a managed instance to Azure Arc-enabled data services. So it sounds like a bit of an odd thing to do a video on, but it's some of the learning that I've done, and it will show how to explore the logs and find out what really happened, because it took me a little while to find out. If you want to set up your own Azure Arc-enabled data services on Kubernetes or in Azure or Amazon, then I recommend this book. So Azure Arc-enabled data services by Nocentino and Ben Weissman. They've written a great book, gives you a lot of detail of the underlying infrastructure and all of the scripts that you need to be able to do exactly what I've done. You've also got a Azure Arc Jumpstart website that also has a lot of details of how to get going as well. But first, let's have a look at my Kubernetes cluster. So I'm using the Visual Studio Code Kubernetes extension, so you can see what we've got. We've got some namespaces. I've got Arc AZ. Here are all the different namespaces, and I've got two nodes. I've got my master node holding all the pods for running Kubernetes, and then I've got my worker node, which is running my Arc data pods. You see, it creates a whole bundle of pods, and there's a lot of other resources available. If we have a look at the pods that we've got, we can use kubectl, get pods. If we do that, we'll get all the ones in the default. No, we'll get the ones in the namespace, and I happen to be in the right namespace. I'll show you that I should have been, using that. We're picking the ones out of the right namespace. And these are the pods that are created to run your Arc-enabled data services. Arc-enabled data services enable you to control your on-prem infrastructure from the Azure portal. So it's really quite neat. So we've got our Bootstrapper. And the Bootstrapper is the first controller that comes up. You see in the top, there's my friend Nico's blog post about data controllers and about which pods and roughly what they do. And the Bootstrap is the first one that you see come up. So it's a good one to start and have a look at our logs. With the kubectl logs, and it's going to be called Bootstrapper and then a random string. So put that up there, and it just says, hey, I'm starting a data controller. And that's literally what it's done since it started. The next pod that's worth looking at is the controller. So control random. And this one will have two containers in it. So it's got the fluent bit, and you'll see that come up in some of the other pods that you have, and the controller container. So we're going to do a kubectl logs on that pod. We'll add in the controller container, and because this one generates a lot of logs, I'm also just going to add tail 50 so that we don't get overrun with data. And that just says that some of our uploads to Azure have been happening. So right now there's not a lot going on in our Azure environment. Direct connectivity is not really working at present. It's coming along, and you can upload your logs from the data controller into log analytics in the portal. But when you start adding into the portal, you will get your Arc DC. So this is my data controller, and we haven't really got a lot of information about it right now. If we have a look in the log analytics workspace, easy for me to say, we can click on logs, and we will close this little pop-up for now and have a look at our tables, and you can see under custom logs, we actually have some data. And this is data that I exported out of the data controller and uploaded into Azure Arc. There's no sample data from the last 24 hours. But you can see that because I've got a table available in my logs, that there was some data there. But anyway, let's not make a MI. So when you make an MI at the command line using azdata, you would set yourself your username and you'd set a password as well. I've already set my password. And then you run azdata arc SQL MI create and give it a name. So we'll call this one wrong. And there are a whole bundle of more parameters that you can add there. Read about those in the book. This is literally so that we make a MI that doesn't work. So I obviously haven't set my password. And I can't type and talk. I can't even talk quietly. Now this password needs to match the there we go. So this password needs to match the complexity. So this was one of the first errors that I had, was I had a really simple password because I'm just mucking about in my own lab, and it fell over because the password wasn't complex enough. And it says, azdata says, right, okay, I'm going to start creating. If we have a look over here, we refresh, we will see that the wrong beard MI has started. And what we get is 2 pods are running. So this is our pod, and I'm sorry, it was 2 containers. 2 containers are running out of the 3 that it requires. Okay, so, well, it'll just sit there like this for ages. So what I'm going to do in another window is do a kubectl, and I'll do logs, and I'll ask for wrong beard mi-0. And it goes, that's not right because it's a 0. And it says, no, we've got 3 containers here. We've got FluentBit, we've got Arc SQL MI, and we've got collectd. And I don't know which one of these isn't working. So I'm going to start with FluentBit. That's going to go through. And remember I said, one thing you want to see is container is now ready. So that container is working. So what was the next one? So we've got collectd. So we've got the logs for that one. That one goes through, and sure enough, container is now ready. So it's not that. So it is the MI that is the problem. So if we look for Arc MI, and we get through there, and what we find is the log of, let's make this one go away. We get the log of our container starting up. They all start up with this license terms, and we get some configuration. Then we get agents trying to join the cluster. Cluster join was successful. So everything was good there. I get this funny little warning here, but then it tells me that the agent is ready. Starts doing a few more bits. We keep going. And it comes up and it says, started some watchers. Now I'm waiting for my processes to be ready. So I found some unready processes. It keeps on going, doing that. And what it'll do is it's done 11 out of a maximum 250 there. If we run it again, it's now at 17. It'll just keep on going. and it'll get to 250, and then it'll restart and try and recreate a new container, and it'll do exactly the same thing. So we could actually look in our controller. So if we do kubectl get pods RKZ, because that means that I can get the name correct. And then we can do the log, grab the logs, controller, and we will tail 50. And there. This is what we get. Our logs will be just full of starting provisioning step. And that will go on for quite a long time. If we tail 500 and see how many of those have we got. Yeah, no, so we're just going to be doing that. And actually, earlier in the logs, we might have seen that collect D had connected or fluent bit was ready, but other than that, that's all the information that we've got. So we've looked at our pod. We've explored the logs on all 3 containers that we've got there. So how can I find out what is wrong here? I did it in the GUI, so I'll show it in the GUI. If I look here, I can do a describe. That would be the same as doing kubectl describe pod wrong beard mi -0. That's going to give me the same information, but I kind of like it up like this. So I can come through, there's my resource name, and I've got my mounts. And my mounts are where my container is looking, has got storage provisioned to it. So I can see that my data mount has come from something called data-7jn5. Okay, so if I look in my storage, I've got some persistent volumes. It's all a bit difficult. There we go. Persistent volume claims. Right. We'll look in there. And I've got 7JN5U, and that one says 7JN5U. So I'll do a describe on that one. You can see why I'd rather do it there than otherwise. And this says, yep, we're connected to using this storage class, and it's using the volume local PV 7BC. So local PV 7BCA4. So this is the volume that my pod is using to provision storage for the containers. And when I go through to that, I can see that this is where it's mounted. It's mounted on vol 75 in my local storage. So I can connect to my Kubernetes cluster. I've got the remote containers extension added. So I'm going to connect to a host, and it is beard Linux 2. That is my worker node, he says, thinking about it. I need to put my password in. Probably. Yep. So I've got my password in, and I'll do a Control-Shift, single quote, and I am now SSH'd into my Kubernetes node. And I go back to my previous, I'm looking for this path. So I can do an ls on that path. And there I've got my storage as provisioned to my container. So I know that it's the Arc SQL MI that's causing me the issue. Oh, look, this is beginning to look like some sort of SQL directory path, which is something I know. So I need to be sudo, effectively run as administrator. So we've got a log, so I can go to log. I've got an error log. Excellent. So if I come back to here and read my error log with a cat, not a kitten, just a cat, and error log. Ta-da! I've got my SQL Server error log. Now I must be able to find out what is going wrong with my MI. Starting up. It's upgrading. Models upgrading. I've got an error. Oh, okay. No, that's just about node roles for the cluster. Nope, nothing. So I carried on exploring around here. Let's not do that. Let's do that instead. I went through and I started looking at some of the other logs that I could find in this directory. Some interesting things. Didn't find anything that told me how to fix my problem. So I opened Azure Data Studio. And in my Azure Data Studio, you can see that I've been playing with a few bits. I've got my Azure Arc controller added already in, and it tells me that I've got, it's not looking too good. Let's come down there. There we go. So it tells me that I've got my wrong beard MI, and it's in a status of creating. Well, yeah, okay, I knew that. How can I work out what's going on? Well, I can click on this. And when I clicked on here, I was expecting to get nothing because it's still actually just creating. But what I get is a Kibana dashboard and a Grafana dashboard. Oh, great. So Grafana is displaying my information. And in fact, if we look here, this is the last 6 hours of my MI that is running, where I was running some workloads through and just kind of looking at the dashboard and seeing what I could garner from there. But let's look at the dashboard for this. So we'll click on the link. Do you want to open the external website? Yes, I do actually. Thank you very much. It's going to open up my Elasticsearch Kibana front page, and I need to put in my username and my password. I knew that was going to happen. Do I need to put in that username? There we go. So I put in my username and my password. This is my data controller username and password. And what I end up with was this page. And I'm like, okay, great. It's got some stuff. What can I do? Click over here, I get a menu. In the menu, it says discover. Oh, great. I'll discover. And once I discovered, it rolled for a little while. And then it came up and went, here you go. I've got a load of logs for you. I'm like, great. So we look at these logs, and you can see we've got counts up at the top. And sure enough, wrong beard MI. Right, excellent. So it looks like I can get some logs, but actually trying to find the information out of all of this is quite difficult. So if you go over to this side and you just click add, so we've got fields over here. I click the add. Now I get my logs. Once I get the logs, straight away, right in my face, it tells me what my problem is. There we go. I failed to create SQL login for user sysadmin. What a wally. Okay. So let's go back to our what not to do. And here is my username that I set. And did it without thinking. I just set a username, sysadmin. I want the admin from my data controller. Yeah, that'll just be sysadmin. And I used it all the way through everything. Yeah, turns out that's not the way to do. So because Ben was one of the people that helped me to work this out. I was going to put in Ben admin. So what I'm going to do is I am going to find my deployment in custom resources. I've got SQL Managed Instances. There is my wrong MI, and I'm going to delete that. Delete that? Yes, please. I'll delete that. And when I delete it, you'll see that these containers disappear. So I've got no wrong beard MI containers there. So I'm going to set the correct password, the correct username, and then I'm going to say create, and it's going to say, please give me a password. I'll go like that, and now it's going to say I'm going to deploy. Over here, we're going to see the wrong beard MI pod come up. It's going to start creating the containers, and takes a little minute to run. Whilst it's running, we could come back to here and have a look. There we go. So what we can see here in our controller logs is that pod container arc-SQL MI provisioning complete. And this normally comes through just before it says I failed. That's interesting. Don't know what that error is. 404 not found. Okay. So that's glorious. Oh, passwords didn't match. How it says that it's running. I'm not quite sure what that's going on about, but now we're running. If we come back into here and we refresh our Azure data controller, it's going to come through. It won't find the databases. There we go. Wrong beard MI has been created. And when I click on it in the in Azure Data Studio in the controller, it does keep telling me that it can't see my databases. It hasn't got any databases. It's brand new. Click on that. We're going to get our managed instance come up, and it's going to load, and it's going to give us our external endpoint. So now I can use that. Oops, if I can copy correctly. Oh, good work, Rob. So we can use that, and we'll create a new connection. So SQL Server, we'll use SQL Login. We've got an admin. We'll put a password in, and then we will be able to connect. Sure enough, if we have a look over here, we're connected to our MI, got our databases, we've got an MI we can start working with. That's what not to do, but also how to find out why it all went a bit wrong.